Okay. Hi, good evening. I'm 𝗷𝗲𝗱𝗆𝗏 and I head employer branding at the Nudge Institute. Apologies for the slight delay. We had a few technical glitches because of which we had some issues getting us online. But thank you for joining us, and we'll give it a few more moments for everyone to join in, and we'll begin the discussion. Great. So, welcome to another edition of 𝗥𝗲𝗱𝗆𝗏, a platform for you to hear from nudsters about their experiences solving some of the hardest problems from within the social sector. A little bit about 𝗥𝗲𝗱𝗆𝗏 first. It is an initiative that seeks to help you unpack the work and life of an individual in the social sector and give you the tools to access the sector as a part of your own professional journey. A little bit about the Nudge Institute. Over 9 years ago, we started with the belief that every human being deserves a dignified life out of poverty. Nudge works on the ground through its livelihoods programs and with multiple stakeholders across its livelihoods ecosystem. Today, we have John and Krishna who are joining us for a discussion on how to navigate opportunities in the social sector. John is an early entrant into the sector. Along with his team, he works on the ground across our implementation locations in India. Krishna, on the other hand, transitioned into the sector recently and leads a central function. Given their distinct contexts and entry points, through our conversation today, we will try to uncover how they went about turning their intent into action and identifying roles that would be suitable for them, along with creating impact at a larger scale. I would like to invite them to introduce themselves and speak a little bit about how they found themselves in the sector and their backgrounds. John, if we may begin with you.
Hey, thanks, Mamta. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for taking the time out to join. I'm John. I joined the Nudge very early on. I've been here since day one, and I lead our rural development programs across multiple states in the country. So, Mamta, to answer your question, how did I find the Nudge or find my purpose in the development sector? There are two things that I wanted to share with the group who joined. One, it was the decision to move to the development sector was pretty much decided by where my interest lied, what my urge was at the time to contribute to the lives of the poor in India. It was not a sudden decision. It was thought through. I'd been thinking about it for a few years. And at the right time, I made the jump. Two, for me, it was very important when I moved from the corporate world to the development sector that I find a team that's really motivated, passionate, is super sharp. That the team gives me the excitement and the joy every day when I walk into work. I found that with the Nudge, and for me, that is a very important decision-making criteria. That if this is going to be a long journey, then I want to be in it with the right people, the motivated people, passionate people. So these two were for me selection, in a way, selection criteria of where I wanted to work.
Okay. Thank you, John. Krishna, if you could take us through your background and how you found yourself interested in the social sector.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mamta, and I'm very excited to be part of this conversation. So, as I always tell people, I'm an engineer by mind, but a people leader by heart. So, I spent like the first 2 decades of my career sort of leading global engineering teams, both across the US, India. And in the last 5 years, I kind of followed my passion to actually take up a leadership position in the people space. And that's how I sort of came into the HR fraternity, so to speak. I currently lead I'm the Chief People Officer at the Nudge Institute, and I lead the people and culture function that is accountable for all things people, starting with talent acquisition to engagement to people operations, as we call it. And we are also responsible for leading organizational initiatives to build a very vibrant culture in pursuit of our mission. while staying true to our spirit. So that's really our charter, and that's what I lead here at the Nudge Institute. As John mentioned, I think just a bit of sort of background in terms of how I thought about coming into the development sector. I think about area of influence of an individual. I've always wanted to give back in a multitude of forms and capacities, and I've always been a life and leadership coach in a personal capacity, giving back through mentorship and coaching to individuals. I've also been mentoring organizations, startups, because I've been a beneficiary of startups myself in the past. But that doesn't complete it. They never completed the picture for me. I think what is the biggest missing piece out of all of this is the societal angle. And that's what sort of pushed me to think about careers in the development sector. And as John mentioned, I think you join organizations for people. And what I actually met through the course of my conversations with folks at the Nudge Institute itself really compelled me. These are extremely passionate, purpose driven individuals. And livelihoods is a space that was very important for me because I believe in more structural solutions given sort of my engineering background. I want to create product like solutions to solve poverty alleviation at scale. And one of our nudge spirits is keeping population scale at the very center of our solutions. So that's what sort of attracted me to the Nudge Institute and brought me here.
Great. Thank you, Krishna. Just a quick note to our audience. If you have any questions for Krishna and John, please feel free to put them in the comment section and we will pick them up towards the end of the session. And now quickly moving on, John, do you, as someone who had taken this step at a very early stage in your career and having spent a significant amount of time now, in retrospect, do you have any notes on what empowered you to make this decision? Because there are many people who are actively looking at the space and still somehow still remain on the fence trying to identify how it might pan out for them. So would you like to share some insights on how it panned out for you?
No, sure. Would love to answer that, Mamta. I think part of it is how I thought through, and fortunately, through the course of these last 10 years in the development sector, I've also had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people who want to consider a career in the development sector. Both people who are trained in development from a young age, as well as people who have been trained as engineers, business school graduates, people who work in the for-profit sector. So a few things that are always considerations. One is, how will my lifestyle be, or how will my life be if I join the development sector, right? So one of the things that I always share is that it's good to understand what life will be like in the development sector before join. Talk to a few people who are working in the development sector. It may be your friends, it may be your colleagues. At the Nudge, there are lots of people who came to the Nudge, walked in, had conversations over a period of a few weeks to months, and then made a considered decision. And that always helps, because it is true that the development sector offers different things compared to the for-profit world, right? Of course, the work is challenging, the work is rigorous, but one needs to also consider their own current financial situation. How will they adjust their lives around what the development sector is able to offer? The second one is this question on what will work be like, not just life, but what will work be like. And some of the genuine and common misconceptions that people have, and therefore also probably are staying away from the development sector, is that, oh, when I come to the development sector, this is a non-profit, work will not be as rigorous, work will not be as sharp, it's a volunteering job. And there are a lot of these ideas that one may have. The truth is far from that. It is just as, if not more rigorous than the roles that you may have played. At the Nudge, we have a very strong OKR, target setting, performance management process. We are very strategic in our approach. We um, uh, emphasize continuous learning at any point in time. Anyone who joins needs to come with the mindset that I need to learn, particularly because, especially if you're coming from the for-profit world, the end participants or consumers in the for-profit language that you're going to be working with uh, uh, are different from the people you have met. You're not the consumer of poverty elevation program, so you may not be able to immediately understand. So one needs to be fully prepared to come in and learn. But the work is multiple times more complex and challenging. These are unsolved problems. You won't find examples of, okay, this is a solved problem, I just need to do it here. These are all unsolved problems. The work is very, very challenging, very exciting, very fulfilling. I think what I've also seen is that people who uh, uh, come in with a very strong purpose intent, that I'm here to solve for the problems of the poor, and that's what's going to give me energy. Find enough fuel to tide over challenges here. So that's sort of a driving force. So if you have that in you, you already are prepared and you're ready. So those are some good markers, I would say, one need to watch out for, or criteria one needs to watch out for while thinking of joining the development sector.
Okay. Thank you, John. I think that's very interesting what you said about the willingness to learn and having that intent-driven focus. Krishna, I'd like to bring this to you and say there is a growing interest, especially among millennials and Gen Z, to give back and build purpose-oriented careers. And as organizations transform the way they function, opportunities are definitely increasing. But building a purpose-driven career goes beyond finding a job in the sector. So, what are the specific research points or considerations that would help them navigate these opportunities in the field? Would you say?
Yeah. No, it's a great question, Mamta, and I think John beautifully answered in terms of looking at certain markers within yourself before you join the sector itself. But what I'd like to sort of start by saying is that building a purpose-driven career does not mean that, like you said, start with joining the social sector, right? And to give some perspective to this, it's very interesting to talk about the framework we actually use at the Nudge Institute to evaluate folks that are coming in to opt for opportunities at the Nudge Institute itself, right? And the framework we leverage is the 𝗥𝗲𝗱𝗆 framework. I mean, the name is a very interesting one, but it kind of provides clarity on how we evaluate folks. And as the name suggests, we actually lay greater emphasis on attitude, smarts, and skills in that order of priority, right? Therefore, attitude and intent is extremely important for us when we think about people who are looking to join the sector and our organization as well. And what we particularly look for within attitude and intent, as John really mentioned, is the passion that tides over every other obstacle that you might face. Because let's not forget that these are extremely complex problems that have not been solved before. So they require almost like completely revisiting solutions that you might have even done in the past. So your learnability quotient is extremely important. Your adaptability to different kinds of situations, your agility to sort of move from one solution to another if one doesn't work. How do you pivot? I think a lot of these things we look for very keenly. And for intent, I think the question to ask oneself, and that's something that we also look deeply into, is what drives you to join the development sector? What drives you to actually look at livelihoods as a problem? Have you done sort of some research in this particular area? Because along the way, you're bound to face extremely hard problems and challenges, but they also spell immense opportunities and fulfillment. So, how do you actually tide over all of this using your anchors of passion, the purpose that drives you, and why you want to solve this problem? I think that's something extremely important to think about as you research about the sector itself. And lastly, as I would say, skills is something that you acquire. We believe that a lot of us have acquired skills either in early in our career through our educational backgrounds or mid-career through our experiences or in late-stage careers through a multitude of experiences that you might have accumulated. But skills is something that you will always constantly have to learn, own, specifically for the development sector. So that's our entire thought process, philosophy in the way we look at intent. So do the research, ask these hard questions to yourself, and then look at opportunities within the dev sector.
Great. Thank you, Krishna. I think that helps a lot of people navigate the approach to applying to a job at the Nudge or any other social sector opportunity. Having said that, the next question is something I'm very keen on hearing both your perspectives, because is there a right time to join the sector? And since both of you joined the sector at different stages of your career, while generally we might agree that the response is no, and that now is as good a time as any to join the sector, from your experience and observation, can you share how joining at different stages of one's career progression can pan out in terms of learning and professional growth? John, if I can bring this to you.
Yeah, sure, Mamta. I joined, I think, after uh, 10 years probably in consulting and FMCG and all of that. So I'm still I'm not a late entrant. I'm still not an early entrant. There are lots of colleagues at the Nudge who are much smarter than I am. They entered the sector much earlier, right after graduation, right after their masters. I think if one makes the choice very early in their career, it's great because you can deeply invest in fundamentals of what development sector work really means and prepare yourself for a very long, fruitful career. For me, as I joined somewhere midway, I also needed to sort of put my skills to work and get started quickly. It took me some time to really understand the community, some of the fundamentals that some of my colleagues have grown up in their careers with. But as an early entrant, one good thing is that all kinds of career options are possible for you. You can prepare yourself to become a development researcher. You can prepare yourself to become an economist. You can prepare yourself and train yourself to move into implementation. You can stay in design as a career choice. You can choose to work with the government deeply and working with the government and learning how government works, especially because in the development sector, governments play a key role when it comes to large scale programs and policies. So there are all kinds of options available and open. For someone who enters sort of, let's say, like me, 10 years down the line, I think when I joined, I was worried. I think I read someone asking the question, what was you apprehensive about? And so I worried about two things. One was, what, you know, will what I have learned in the past be relevant in the development sector at all, right? Will I start from scratch? Um, Partly the answer is it's a yes and no. I mean, I needed to unlearn a lot, and or some of what I had learned before. Um, I needed to update that understanding. But what I'd learned before, in terms of I brought a different types of skill sets into the development sector work, managing large projects and programs, handling a P&L, having an understanding of marketing, etc., etc. So different people bring different skills, and all of them are going to be useful. The work is not very different here in the non-profit sector. The challenges are very different. Um, if you come at a late stage, Krishna will be able to answer that much better. But I think one brings in a wealth of experience into the sector if one joins late, much later than I did, for example. What is really important in the development sector, when I say development sector, it's not just non-profit, by the way. Development sector is non-profits, governments, and markets. A big need is thinking at scale, which Nudge prioritizes a lot. And people who have worked in large organizations running large scale initiatives have a lot to add as value to the work that we here do in the development sector. So different people bring in different capacities and will have different levels of learning to do. There is no, like you said, there is no one right time, right? You make the choice. I think the marker again is, are you ready to think of development as your career, right? Are you ready to now learn and build your career here? Do you feel the need to deliver impact very strongly? Um, uh, then there are options are plenty.
Great. Thank you, John. Krishna, I'd like to invite you to share your perspectives, not only from your experience, but also from all the nudsters or other social sector workforce that you might have observed or interacted with.
No, sure, Mamta. So I think first of all, like you correctly said, there's no right time to join the sector, and John has beautifully articulated the various sort of stages of one's career phases and how they might actually benefit or contribute to the development sector. I want to take sort of my own personal reference point in joining the social sector quite late into the career, and I think it offers a very interesting set of propositions. As John mentioned, I think a lot of late stage career entrants into the dev sector, they bring a wealth of experiences, right? And those experiences are functional in nature, could be functional in nature. They could come in from a product background, from a finance background, and so forth. And the ability to contribute those wealth of experiences to accelerate the maturity curve of a particular function within the organization you're joining. So a lot of the times what you witness, depending on the type of development sector organization that you join, they could be at a certain stage in the maturity curve, right? And if you come in with those wealth of experiences, you're able to accelerate that function's journey along the maturity curve, thereby benefiting the organization immensely. At the same time, I also believe that as late entrants, you need to do a lot of domain building. So the dev sector, like any other domain, has its own set of knowledge bases that you need to actually invest in. Just assuming that you've done it, been there, done it before successfully, doesn't mean that you can do it at the same in the dev sector, right? So you have to understand the domain, because without depth in the domain, you cannot craft contextual solutions irrespective of which function you belong. It could be the PNC function that I belong to or the finance function. So it's very important to have that sort of mindset, which we talked about earlier as well, the learning mindset, as you come in as a late entrant. I think also the other aspect I want to talk about is the aspect of diversity of experiences. Many times, individuals who've had a long career, they also have traversed the path of multiple functions in the past. So they have gone, maybe they've spent some time in sales, maybe they've spent some time in product, even. Now, because of this cross section of experiences that they may have, they actually have the ability to contribute to the dev sector cross functionally as well, because like the for-profit sector, the dev sector is no different in the sense that many times the solutions are complex and require a multifunctional approach, right? For instance, if you are engaged in fundraising, your ability to sell the programs on the ground to a prospective donor also leverages your skill from a sales background perspective. So if you brought in those diversity of experiences into the dev sector, you can actually greatly benefit and impact the organization that you're joining as well. So in summary, as a late stage entrant, you bring a multitude of these capabilities which you can actually bring to bear on the dev sector as well.
Great. Thank you, Krishna. We're actually getting a lot of questions online as well. I'll quickly move into some of the audience questions that were submitted earlier. And Krishna, this one's for you. Could you share insights into the organization's culture and what differentiates it within the social sector, particularly in comparison to the private or corporate sectors?
Yeah, I'll start with the commonalities. I think, as John talked about, some of the misconceptions that people carry about the dev sector, that it's more volunteer based, it's best effort based. I think the similarities are there completely from the for-profit sector. It's as outcome focused. As John mentioned, at the Nudge, we have an OKR-based framework that we adopt, which critically examines both input and outcomes for anything that we do from a work standpoint. The same performance review rigor that we do for all nudsters applies here as well. So there are a lot of, I would say, more similarities to the for-profit sector as compared to differences. The one that I like to particularly talk about is uniquely about the nudge is the fact that we definitely look at the solutions at population scale, which is one of our nudge spirits, in fact, our values, as we call them internally. And I would like to think that population scale as a phrase is very different from how in the for-profit world you think about scale, because the diversity depth of use cases that hit you when you build for population scale, I think is significantly different as compared to the for-profit world. And the big difference I'd like to call about is many organizations in the for-profit world struggle to establish linkage from the work that one does to the purpose of the organization. Here in the development sector, the purpose linkage is extremely strong, because your ability to link your work and say, why am I doing this, is much more, I would say, relatable to the mission of the organization as compared to the for profit world. So these are some similarities and differences that I would like to speak to.
Okay, thank you, Krishna. John, the next one I'd like to direct to you. As organizational leaders, what is your opinion about students and first time employees joining the social sector, driven purely by passion to bring about change? Over the next 10 years, as economic situations in the country are bound to change, will passion with little to no financial nets be enough to sustain such individuals? How do organizations like the Nudge help such individuals or groups grow?
Tough question, but an important question. Uh, well, see, I think the nudge is one grain in a you know large sea of sand, right? The market forces that dictate decisions of non-profits in the country dictate decisions at the nudge as well. The reality is that the non-profit sector can uh, can only afford to pay so much to the talent compared to the for-profit sector, and that applies to the nudge as well. I think we're all part of the same reality. Yes, it is true that when someone joins early, you need to also save up. You need to also invest prudently. You need to be very sharp about your investment strategies and so on. Definitely something that needs to be kept in mind. Um, um, uh, I think at the nudge we can continue to do a lot more on this front. We do have options for, like any other organization has options for employees to. I think Krishna should probably take up this question and he'll be able to give a better answer. But there are sessions that people organize here on investments and so on. But I think not enough. I think we can do a lot more. Some of the things that Nudge takes care of is the covering for insurance, covering for your L&D needs. So we allocate a certain percentage of our salary budgets for anyone to access here to fulfill their learning needs. You can go for a certification course, you can go for some program that you want, and so on and so forth. There are different ways in which the Nudge tries to support the learning and growth of individuals. But I think from a long-term investment and savings point of view, we have the same factors dictating our decisions as any other organization. But Krishna, do you want to take up that question as well?
Yeah. I think the standard sort of reward mechanisms that exist in the for-profit sector just by design are not available in the development sector. As an example, I mean, it could be around ESOPs as one of the mechanisms to create long-term wealth for employees, right, within an organization. I think the idea that we are constantly sort of thinking about is how do we provide an extremely attractive proposition, not just in terms of compensation alone, but also the ability for you to craft a very multidimensional career at the nudge, uh, a very purpose driven career. And at the same time, the benefits that we offer in terms of learning, in terms of all the other employee benefits that provide a sort of a safety net for you, should be best in class. And that's how we are sort of thinking about the employee value proposition as we move along on our journey to support Nudsters.
Okay, thank you, Krishna and John. The next question, Krishna, is for you. What insights would you offer to someone with a background in HR or talent acquisition in the private sector with a tech or product hiring background who's looking to transition into the social sector? And how different or similar would the competencies required be?
Yeah. Um, I think from a similarity perspective, all the competencies that you leverage as a talent acquisition professional come in really handy, at least in my experience, for the development sector as well. For instance, the ability for you to understand the company's employee value proposition, the ability to articulate that to a prospect, the ability to understand a role and the trajectory of the business for which the role is being hired for at a greater depth, in order for you to bring richness to that conversation, is also something that will be transferable from the for-profit world. The differences actually are for me more about what are the levers in which you have traditionally used in the for-profit world to sell a role. Those levers may or may not work, right? If you talk about, for instance, just purely compensation based approaches that organizations have used in the for-profit world to attract somebody into the space, those approaches don't work. So you'll have to reimagine what is your acquisition strategy, and given the, I would say, heterogeneity of roles in the dev sector, because I would say an organization in the dev sector, it's not hiring by quantity, it's hiring by quality. And I'm saying that with a lot of respect to the for-profit world as well, but it's also the number of resources you have to deploy towards solving a particular problem in a function. I would say that quality is something that triumphs quantity even more in the dev sector. So your ability to work on multiple roles, complex roles to be hired at the same time, and just the diversity of these roles, I think makes it a lot more challenging for a talent acquisition professional in the dev sector. So those are some of the similarities and differences, Mamta.
Okay. Thank you, Krishna. And thank you to our audience as well who are sending in a lot of questions. We'll take some of the live questions now. John, this one is for you. What do we need to unlearn from our corporate experience?
Yeah, I think there's so many, but let me focus on maybe a few. I think one of the things is what Krishna has referred to twice now, which is, in the for-profit world, the incentives can be monetary in nature, right? And are not just monetary, but you can sort of plan for bonuses and performance bonuses and whatnot. And to a large extent, that's true that how we choose organizations when we grow in our careers depends on how good our compensation is. And even retention strategies, sometimes when you make in the for-profit world, compensation is a big part of that conversation. In the non-profit world, if you were to build a team, and help them be successful, build the team's capacity to deliver impact, you don't have that in your arsenal. You don't have monetary incentives. So why do people move to the development sector? It's because of the passion for impact, to contribute to the society. So that's all you have in your arsenal. So as a leader, when you come into the development sector, you will now have to reorient yourself on how do I motivate my team on the basis of their intrinsic motivation, which is impact, quality of work, recognition, and so on, right? So that's a big piece of what you might want to unlearn. I think there are so many other things. I think the programs, typically when we work in poverty alleviation, these are long range programs, right? When you work in the for-profit world, if your product or service is working immediately, because your customer pays for it or doesn't pay for it. Customer gives you quick feedback, right? But in the development world, you are working on systems change. You're working on improving the life of someone over a period of 3 years, 10 years. So you will get to know whether what you're doing is working. A few yards down the line. So reframing work timelines around that is very important. I guess, I mean, I could go on. I think there are one other thing is, do you come from an organization that is frugal in the way it thinks, right? A lot of non-for-profits actually are frugal, and they innovate quite a lot. But how much can you do with the little resources that you have? It'll really test your creativity. And So that's one thing that I wouldn't say unlearn, but sort of you adjust down to. The other important thing is that, and I wouldn't say this is true of all for-profits, but there is a certain way in a lot of for-profits work in which you take decisions top down, or sort of you make strategic decisions and teams sort of translate that into action on the ground. In this world is driven by intrinsic motivation. So one needs to get used to how do we enable decentralized decision making, how do we empower people on the ground, how do we build relationships with people long run to get our work done. So there are many aspects that you will have to learn here on how to execute, how to think long term, how do you think strategy, and so on and so forth. Um, in many ways, it is similar as well, but these are probably a few ways in which the developments of the world will be different.
Thank you, John. Thank you for sharing those very interesting insights. Quickly moving on to the next question that has come in live for Krishna. Although we did speak about compensation in the discussion a bit, what are the opportunities available for senior leadership?
Yeah, Mamta. So I think, Santosh, thanks for the question, first of all. I think like any other organization in the for-profit world, depending on organization to organization, there are opportunities available across functions. And, they could be, as John mentioned, for instance, in the program space where you work on direct programs or you work with the government to implement the programs at scale. And that's something that has a different set of roles. It could be roles around product, learning and development, particularly within product as well, product design, aspects of operations when you have to lead a large workforce. And these are all leadership roles pretty much that we continue to sort of hire for as well in the past and will continue in the future. And the same goes for the horizontal functions that support an organization's growth, right? Like whether it be finance or HR, as we call PNC, the nudge, or marketing. So the leadership roles do exist across functions. And your second part of the question in terms of compensations, obviously, those are, depending on which organization you're talking to, those would vary, like in the for-profit world. All I like to say is that there is a certain science behind compensation ranges and what they are offered to people in the sector, and they are benchmarked as well, right? So from that perspective, it is competitive in the development sector itself.
Great. Thank you, Krishna. Picking up another question, how can one balance purpose and professional growth in the social sector? I'd open it up to either of you, both of you, to take up this question.
Krishna, do you want to take a shot?
Yeah, it's a great question, actually. And as we talked through the last sort of 45 minutes in this conversation, we talked about purpose a lot, we talked about passion a lot. And John also talked about it being one of the major anchors for an individual to sort of tide over the challenges that exist in the dev sector. So obviously, purpose is sort of paramount, center of one's sort of career in the social sector. The balance on professional growth, I think, just the way the problems exist in the dev sector, and you can talk about different verticals that exist within the dev sector, whether it be around livelihoods or education or health. These are extremely hard problems, and I would argue, and I would put my sort of hand out and say that some of these problems are even more complex than what you will encounter in the for-profit world. And professional growth, for me at least, happens when once somebody sort of reaches beyond their capabilities. It's just a bit stretch about their capabilities, not too beyond, and the problems allow you to do that in the social sector, right? So a lot of the situations that you will find yourself in will actually accelerate your professional growth, very similar to a startup that you might be working with. And often startups are alluded to accelerate one's career growth or professional growth, right? So I think I would argue that the social sector provides ample opportunities for one's professional growth as well.
Okay. Thank you, Krishna. So another fairly straightforward question, and John, we'd like to get your insights on this. Are there any certifications or courses that you recommend to get your foot in the door in the non-profit world?
Oh yeah, sure, definitely. I mean, there are so many of them actually. There are really, really good schools in the country. Tata Institute of Social Sciences is one, 𝗷𝗲𝗱𝗆𝗄 is one, Ashoka is another. So any um, uh, liberal arts program that you can get your hands on, that you can do formally, will be very useful. There are a lot of online, of course, these are long range 1 year, 2 year programs. There are online courses that are really useful as well. One of the most popular and it's is courses is MIT X course called Data Economics and Development Policy, and it covers a lot of wide-ranging aspects of development, done by some Nobel laureates and economists. There are multiple courses like that. I would even say it for starters, get started. If the objective is to learn about development sector, then you can start off with some really, really good books that talk about development. And it's not a necessity that you need to get a certificate to enter the non-profit world. As Krishna has said, at least at the Nudge, we look for attitude, smarts, and skills in that order. So um, so those would be some recommendations from my end, at least.
Great. Thank you. I think this is a question we get asked quite frequently, and it's really nice to get these inputs. I think it will help a lot of people. Quickly, another question for Krishna. While you articulated the key criteria of decision making, what were some of your initial fears, apprehension, and which those turned out to be unfounded a few months later when you took the plunge? I think they're looking for a really candid response from you, Krishna, here. So,
Yeah. So, like, I think I was talking about engineer by mind. I did a lot of the research beforehand. So I didn't have too many unfounded fears. Like, I came in with my eyes open about what could those differences be from the for-profit world, what could be some similarities as well. I think one of the things that John talked about is kind of expecting that it's going to be much easier to do and it's more volunteer based effort. That's not a fear that I had, but I heard about it from the on the dev sector. That was completely unfounded, right? As I came in, it requires the same degree, if not more, intensity and passion to sort of pursue the problems that you're working on. I also want to draw like at least one observation, which is in the for-profit world, depending on the scale of the organization that you're part of, many a times you have layers of leadership that support you in your functional execution, right? You typically, depending on the position that you occupy, you have a larger workforce that you can deploy towards a problem. I think in the dev sector, I think less is more in the sense that it's all about creating the impact with less, and therefore lesser number of leadership hierarchy that you might actually encounter, which actually requires you to be extremely hands-on. And depending on the stage of career that you join in, either mid stage or late stage, you might actually have to go back and rewind the clock and be little bit more, I would say, depth oriented to be able to build your repertoire, your credibility within the organization, which you might have had the benefit of having leaders under your watch in the for-profit world. So that's one which I think from an entrance standpoint, at least me personally, I was conscious of, and I continue to sort of work at as I work at the Nudge.
Great. Thanks, Krishna. Just in the interest of time, we'll take one more question from our live audience. How can one find their domain, especially for someone who is working in the social sector for 4 years, but in generalist roles? I'd actually like to open this question to both of you because both of you come from different perspectives. And yeah, if John, if we could start off with you.
Sure. Yeah, Vaishnavi, a very important point. I think I actually would, would say that there is enough growth and opportunity in a generalist role in the development sector as well. You don't need to be restricted to one domain. I've seen people coming from different sectors within the social sector, different thematic areas, I mean, within the social sector, or people coming from the for-profit world. We are all able to contribute differently, and in a team with multiple different perspectives, there is generally a lot of creativity. People challenge each other's ideas, and it's a very healthy ecosystem. We value that a lot here at the Nudge. We don't want one kind of, okay, you've been trained in livelihoods, come work on livelihood. We want different worldviews coming into the same discussion. So as a generalist, one can build a career in the development sector. But to answer your question, I think one can choose functionally that I want to be in research, I want to be in design, I want to be in implementation, I want to work on with government and in policy. So one can choose functionally, and you can translate these skill sets to health or livelihood or any other thematic area, right? So a lot of people choose this path, choose to stay in implementation, but I've worked in education, I've worked in livelihoods, I've worked in gender, I've worked in multiple different types of thematic areas, and that's good too. If you were to pick thematically, I think I would say it's a question of a personal preference, that I am very passionate about education, so I want to stay in education. Fair enough, and that's a very good choice to make. Education is a large enough sector. If I really care about environment, then let me stay in sustainability, and that can be a good choice as well. At the end of the day, I think the same rules that apply in the for-profit apply here as well. If you are excited about coming into the office or going to the field every day, you will do well in that profession or in that career path. So that's the question that you need to ask, that, okay, I am working in education. Every day I wake up, I feel really excited about the class and the work that I do. You are good for yourself. If you feel that, no, I feel like I want to try something else, please go ahead and try. Um, um, it is important, I would emphasize, that with whichever domain, vertical or horizontal, that you want to pick organizations where you find your colleagues very passionate, hardworking, have the right intent, and so on, because that's eventually 50% of your day, or more, depending on how much time you want to give to your work. And if you get the core group of people you want to work with right, that sort of, for me at least, that's very important. And I'm sure one will find a career path within that organization or within that sector.
Great. Thank you, John. If I could quickly bring this to you, Krishna.
Yeah, I'll just build on John in terms of what he had talked about. The only additional thing I'll say is that if you're in a generalist role, particularly Vaishnavi, in your case, I'm assuming you're talking about yourself. Many a times the generalist role offers a window into looking at what interests you from a domain perspective. As John said, it could be thematic, depending on the type of organization that you're already part of. Are they working in a specific area, education, health, livelihoods? And many a times when we work in generalist roles, we stay at a distance from the program delivery, just by maybe circumstances, intent, and so forth. I would urge you to potentially look at deepening your understanding of the program, maybe in the organization that you're currently part of, be it whatever theme that it might be working on, and use that as a means to get into the program aspect and see whether that excites you. And if it does, which aspect of the program structure would you want to be part of and build your career into? So I just wanted to sort of give you a tip on how to think about it practically as well in the organization that you may be part of.
Great. Thank you. So thank you, Krishna and John. I think purely in the interest of time, we find ourselves wrapping up this session. Thank you for thoroughly engaging us with your responses and taking us through your own inspiration and journeys. I would quickly give you a minute if you have any final thoughts to share with our audience in terms of how to simply go about finding the opportunity for yourself and getting your foot in the door in the social sector. Just a quick response. John, if you can start.
Reach out, talk to people in the development sector. There's no substitute for it. I would even say either, say, look, I want to come to one of your schools, or I want to come to one of your villages where you're working. I want to see your work. Travel, go see the work. You will learn far more than you would otherwise. If possible, do some volunteering work ahead of time. You'll get a feel of what you're getting into. But yeah, talk to people. That will give you a lot more clarity.
Great, thanks. Krishna?
Yeah, find your cause that sort of really excites you. Immerse yourself in maybe even volunteer kind of experiences to understand that cause a lot more, and do the research and take the plunge.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you to Krishna and John, and thank you to our audience for joining us, for staying with us through our initial delays, and for sharing your questions. We encourage you to visit our website to go through our current openings and explore opportunities. And yes, we'll see you for the next edition of Jigyasa. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.